Hello, thank you for joining us for today's Ask the Pet Food Pro. I'm Debbie Phillips Donaldson, Editor-in-Chief of Pet Food Industry, and I'll be your moderator today. Ask the Pet Food Pro is a series of expert chats brought to you by Pet Food Forum and the editors of Pet Food Industry. You can find our content at petfoodindustry.com. Today's chat addresses an important and rising area of pet food manufacturing, automation, and specifically accuracy within automated equipment and systems. It is sponsored by APEC. Thanks very much to them for their support. Our expert today is Caleb Townsend, Vice President of Sales for APEC. Welcome, Caleb. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Debbie.
Before we start the discussion, I have a few announcements. First, you've all been muted to ensure that everyone can hear and focus on the discussion. So please submit your questions in the chat box. Some of you submitted questions beforehand. We really appreciate those, and we'll try to get to as many of those today as we can. And finally, this chat is being recorded. You can access the recording starting in about a week at petfoodforumevents.com. Click on the About tab at the top of the page, then select Ask the Pet Food Pro from the drop-down menu. Okay, so with the housekeeping out of the way, let's dive into today's topic. Caleb, I'd like to start with some examples. What types of automation best streamline the batching, blending, and mixing processes in pet food production?
Yeah, automation plays a crucial role in optimizing pet food production, particularly in batching, blending, and mixing. Some of the most effective automation solutions would be automated batching systems, precise ingredient measurements, and consistency, also reducing waste and improving efficiency. And then also recipe management software. So there's several different types from different vendors, but they help maintain product consistency by managing ingredient set points and handling both batching and continuous processes. Also, just traceability and lot tracking, especially on the pet food side. This automated tracking systems help monitor ingredients from entry to the finished product. So that'll ensure quality control, regulatory compliance. And then finally, blending and mixing automation key. High-tech mixing systems help ensure uniform distributions of those ingredients, improving the product quality and reducing manual labor. So getting a good mix before going to extrusion is definitely key there.
Okay. So let's dive into a little bit of those different areas. For example, with automated ingredient handling systems, how can those automated ones, how can they reduce downtime during batch transitions?
Precise scheduling and coordination are key. These systems will help synchronize ingredient deliveries, so you have a smooth transition without any bottlenecks. Also, preloading and staging, so ingredients can be pre-measured and staged ahead of time, allowing for a rapid switchover without delays there and minimize that downtime. Also, automated cleaning and changeover procedures. So clean in place systems automated there will help reduce that downtime caused by that sanitation requirement between the certain batches. Also, recipe management and digital control. Smart automation ensures seamless recipe transitions by adjusting parameters dynamically. So that really eliminating that human error from there. And then finally, real-time monitoring and alerts. So automated systems help detect and correct inefficiencies at real time, and then that prevents that disruption before it escalates.
Okay. Someone submitted a question beforehand about adding online sensors, including things like NIR spectrometers. And do those help measure quality directly in the process?
Yeah, for sure. NIR is key. You can really track all your protein, moisture, all the key types on that. It's important to have a good database too. So you're going to have to still have some outside testing every once in a while to make sure that your NIR is in line. So it's giving you good information there. So especially if you use those in line, it's not causing any destructive analysis of that kibble or whatnot. So you can be doing it as you go, adjusting on the fly. The automation system will adjust as needed, depending on ingredients. Sometimes those moistures, fats, and protein contents can fluctuate from one load to the next, and that helps control that on a constant basis.
What about other quality tests? Can those be integrated into the process? Or what other quality tests can be integrated in the process to keep the expected quality level?
Yeah, outside of those NIR testing, some others, you can do real-time defect detection. Big thing right now is AI. There's been some
course.
automation AI platforms being integrated into those like vision systems to analyze that product for surface imperfections or misalignments and any contamination before packaging. There's multi-spectrum lighting. Advanced lighting techniques enhance visibility, allowing sensors to detect subtle color variations. So you're having the same consistency from one pellet to the next and one batch to the next. Others is like 3D and full color inspection. So it really provides a 360-degree analysis, ensuring accurate identification of defects across various product types. And then there's automated rejection mechanisms. So defective items are automatically removed from the product line, preventing quality issues downstream. And then finally, you see barcode and label verification. So there's some vision systems that can validate that those printed characters on the barcode or the label, ensuring the correct labeling and compliance with industry standards.
Okay. You mentioned packaging. So is there robotics involved that help improve the speed and precision in the end of line packaging and palletizing?
Yeah, so definitely on the palletizing side, I think these have come quite a long way, especially with robotics too. The high-speed robotic palletizers can handle bulk cases efficiently and really reduce that cycle time and increase throughput for accurate case packing. So they can minimize errors and improve product integrity as well. And then also flexible handling. So robots can adapt to various packaging configurations, making them ideal for diverse product lines and different items there. It also reduce labor costs with that automation and the robots and decrease reliance on that manual labor and improve efficiency and reducing operational expenses. Taking those repetitive movements by
Right.
manual labor that can cause strains and different issues, putting it into a robot that wouldn't cause that issue. And then also just seamless integration. They can integrate with existing product lines or production lines and streamlining that process from packaging all the way to palletizing.
Right. Now we'll dive into labor in a few minutes. It sounds the human element comes in monitoring and managing all these systems and keeping an eye on them in real time to make sure that nothing is happening that shouldn't be happening.
Correct. Yeah.
We've had a couple questions about energy efficiency. How can automation improve energy efficiency in any part of the process, whether it's extrusion, heating, cooling, and does it help you measure your energy output or intake?
Yeah, automation, definitely energy efficiency and heating, cooling, and extrusion processes. This can be done in several ways, but smart temperature regulation with automated sensors, controlling those and adjusting the heating and cooling dynamically on the fly, and really minimizing the energy loss. Also on the efficient extruder drive systems, upgrading to a modern AC vector drive, very beneficial on the energy side of things and really reducing those mechanical inefficiencies. That'll cut your energy consumption by far. On the heat side, advanced heat recovery systems can capture excess heat from the extrusion process or on boiler systems, different things like that to really lower that overall energy demand. And then also on the cooling side, that automated cooling systems really prevent overuse of water and energy by maintaining that precise temperature control. And those have come quite a long ways here in the last several years. And finally, kind of that non-intrusive energy monitoring. So you can have ultrasonic measurements to help track energy flow without disrupting the production. So you can see those right on the screen and adjust accordingly or have it automated to adjust accordingly.
And then I would assume it provides data for if the manufacturer is trying to track their energy usage or even do a life cycle analysis or improve efficiency.
Yep. And then reporting and everything from that too, so they can really see where.
Okay, great. We've talked about extrusion. So are there big differences in automation systems or processes, or even the impact of automation in dry kibble production versus wet, or maybe say freeze dried?
Yeah, there's some. I don't know terribly well on the freeze dried side. We've done some on that, but touching on the dry kibble, automated batching, extrusion, and drying systems ensure that consistent production rates. And then also just conveyor and belting technologies, streamlining that ingredient movement, reducing those bottlenecks, and improving the efficiency. On the wet food side, you got automated filling, sealing, and sterilization processes that enhance throughput by minimizing manual handling and ensuring precise portioning. So you got HPP, high pressure processing, that helps maintain product quality while accelerating production as well. The freeze dried side, I just know they kind of use that and optimize that moisture removal process
Right.
and reducing that processing time. So again, using sensors and the automation, they can take care of that.
Okay. Yeah, we just had a question come in back to the extrusion side of things on what is the best way to optimization of dryer parameters?
On the drier side, mainly you're really looking at the moisture balance. You're using those sensors, same thing, looking at what your moistures are going in, going out, and adjusting those on the fly. And those would be controlled by the automation system.
Okay. And then a more technical question related to coating systems. Have you ever tried to add optical coherence tomography onto your coating systems to measure the coating thickness and quality? OCT, optical coherence tomography.
I don't know if I don't know on that one, to be honest.
Speaking of what might be coming down the line, are there any new quality testing systems or parameters coming in the future that might impact the types of equipment, automated equipment needed?
I think the big side on the quality side is really more the FSMA and those different regulations there pushing
Okay.
that. So I don't know on the quality side, to be honest,
Okay.
aside of those standard sensors and testing.
All the ones you named. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the whole human and labor aspect. How can automated material handling reduce worker strain and injury risks? You touched on that before, but maybe dive into that a little bit more, please.
Yeah, so definitely on the packaging side for sure, like that's a lot of lifting, twisting types of injuries that you can really remove with automation, especially with a robot, with palletizing and that. But across the board, even on micro ingredient systems, you got the same thing of exposure to ingredients. If you're hand adding everything, someone's standing over, being exposed to some ingredients aren't good to be constantly breathed in. So when you go to more of an automated system and have a micro system there, you can set everything up to they're filling bins, and then you're only exposed to it for a short amount of time, but also you can minimize that exposure with dust control as well. And then every batch is dosing without someone being right over top of those ingredients or hazardous types.
That might also come to play if someone has a particular allergy, right?
Exactly.
What about, you mentioned regulation, so how can automation help manufacturing personnel, the operator personnel comply with regulations, like, or whether on the FSMA, the food safety side, or maybe OSHA regulations?
Yeah. On the OSHA side, for the safety regulations there, you got your typical machine guarding and lockout tagout. Those can be tied in with the automated system as well. You can have light curtains and different things like that to keep someone out, and same thing, triggering a system to shut down and be set there. That real-time monitoring and alerts can also detect any unsafe conditions such as excessive noise or poor air quality, or trigger corrective actions from that, built into that automation. Touched on the robotic safety. compliance
Right.
and needing that and having safeguards to protect workers. Automated training and compliance tracking. We got digital platforms to ensure employees receive OSHA mandated safety training and maintaining proper documentation. There's software to that on that side. And then just ergonomic assistance, like we talked about with robotics and automated material handling, really reduce those strain related injuries and aligning with those OSHA safety standards, keeping those OSHA items to a minimum or to null.
Okay, so do most automated systems or components come with training included on also how to operate them?
Typical systems, you'll have that built in of a startup deal with a service technician or someone that will sit down, go through training, usually maybe a week, those employees that will be using that and really getting them up to speed, or also having a train the trainer of someone internally being trained so
Right.
they can pass that on to any turnover on their end.
Okay. So what is the impact of all this on the number of people needed, both from a supervisory level and then also the actual operators? Does this drastically reduce the number needed? I know we all know that in the pet food industry, finding enough qualified people is becoming more and more of an issue. So I'm assuming it helps with that.
Yeah, it definitely does. And it's different from every plant that I've been in. Some are super highly dependent on manual labor and strictly all hand dosing. When those types of automated systems and micro ingredient batching type systems are put into place, makes a huge difference. So you could go from 8 to 10 people on a shift down to maybe a couple in that specific location, because instead of someone standing over weighing and dosing and having several of those trying to stay ahead of batches, you have a machine doing it and you just have one person that's filling those bins and making sure they're topped off, and then maybe one other staging and dosing depending on how they're filling. Some use carts and whatnot. Others use different conveyance from there that they would weigh and dose and then can convey from there. So depending on how much and how highly automated you go, really will change that amount.
Okay. That brings up a question I've had all along during this discussion so far is, say a manufacturing process is mostly manual still. Maybe it's a smaller company or an older one that just hasn't quite updated. Where does a company, is there best place for a company to start in terms of automation?
My thoughts would be, especially if you don't have any kind of recipe automation, I think that's a good start, because
That
once you
makes
get
sense.
that into place, then you have that base and saying, okay, you have this, now you can pass that on. That recipe is built into your system. And then when you're running a product, okay, now let's add on batching and dosing. Then it's sending that recipe down to the batching system, weighing and dosing the micro ingredients or mid-size bulk bag type ingredients, whatnot. That'd be that next step. And then just moving down. You get to robotics and palletizing, like some of that is pretty expensive. So you try to do the cheapest and the most bang for your buck. And then you see
Mhm.
more and more from that. But I think the recipe side is a key to start with and then build from there.
Which brings up another question. Is there a typical ROI that manufacturers can expect in terms of, say, they start with a recipe, automated recipe system?
Yeah, so that's pretty tough too, because it's again very based on from one company to the next. How many employees do you have in that area? Say if you're looking at micro ingredient side, how many do you have working the 3 shifts or whatever shifts you have? So that has a lot of factors that tie into it. So it's not really, oh yeah, this is for sure a 1 year, 2 year payback, but there's a lot of complexity in what those initial costs are, how highly automated they're going, and what efficiency improvements they're looking for. So it's hard to nail that one down because I've seen
Understood.
it all across the board, depending on how highly automated they go.
And I'm assuming that it also depends on their scale of production, how
Yeah,
much they produce.
what their labor costs, different things like that. So that's a lot of, it's really based, kind of have to look at that individually per plant.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And we had another interesting question come in related to labor and personnel is what is the evolving role of customer service using both automation and live agents? So I think the question is related to my take on it, if I'm interpreting correctly, is that it's related to dealing with the consumer. Does that tie in to automating the
Yeah.
production system?
Yeah. So again, on that side, it's a different. We've got the automation of the plant and plant control system, and then others like that of that might be more of a customer service base of through their typical website, but still you can use automated types there. If you're seeing a lot more with the kind of AI powered self-service
Sure.
kind of stuff that you go in.
The chat bots.
Yeah, so there's a lot to that can be done and can be done pretty well. So it just depends on if you have a good base there that they can field, the AI can kind of field those questions, and then the higher, more complex issues are have a live person to be able to jump into answer or more connect to the ones that are needed.
Understood, understood. But you've mentioned AI a couple of times. Do you know of ways that AI is specifically being used or is on the horizon in specific areas of automation and production process?
I think we're on the cusp of some stuff there. I think we're going to see a lot of changes there in the next 2 to 5 years at most. So I think we're not a ton on our end at this point, but I think it's pretty close to taking off there. Some other vendors I've talked to have platforms that if they have equipment problems or something, using it instead of a service manual trying to search through something, it's a better search function, I guess I would call it. But it really is learning as a person's asking it if this certain problem is occurring, and then it's asking the right questions back. So it's a person, it's that AI side of things that can direct the correct questions. I think we'll see more and more on that down the road here, but I think the first steps will be more of kind of the service side of equipment and whatnot.
That makes sense, and possibly analyzing some of the data you get from the systems.
So again, having all those different sensors and whatnot, pulling that in, and even on the mechanical side of seeing those hours, tracking that where we've relied on someone pulling up graphs and checking things. I think the AI side of things is going to be able to do that and give good information of, hey, you need to change this gearbox pretty soon, giving that kind of updated information to the plant before it's causing downtime.
And I can imagine that these systems generate a lot of data, and for it to be useful to the manufacturer, they need a way to comb through it and compile it and analyze it.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe going back a little bit more into the actual production, a question has come in about asking if there are reliable optical sorting machines, for example, to distinguish between uncoated and coated kibbles, different shapes, things like that.
There are, I don't know all the different vendors on that side, but I know from my previous, I worked for a contractor in the past building different plants and different things, but we had a wheat facility with optical sorting there. And I think that's come a long way. Same thing. It's looking at that process flow, like you're flying those kibbles across. I think the same thing can be done on that as it's traveling down through to say, hey, oh, this isn't right. Let's get this out of the line. So I don't know the vendors providing that off the top of my head, but there's definitely the technology for it.
Okay. And then related back to quality, so there are automated traceability systems, correct?
Yes.
So those how can those help support compliance with, say, AFCO nutrient profiles or FSMA regulations? Maybe you can delve into that a little bit more, please.
Yeah, so definitely the end-to-end traceability technologies like RFID, that machine vision and barcode scanning that I mentioned earlier, really ensure that real-time tracking of the ingredients from ingredients all the way to finished product. So giving the ability to hit that traceability requirements of FSMA. There's other automated data management platforms. I know there's several different vendors doing things there, but that really helps supply and manage that critical tracking data to be able to pull that up as needed. Also, you got laboratory information management systems, LIMS, that will capture and store essential compliance data, and then allowing the manufacturer to provide those to the authorities when needed
Okay.
with any required sampling or testing documentation. So that kind of holds it all in a good database there. And then outside of that, just that label verification and accuracy. So again, those automated label inspection systems do a great job of detecting missing lock codes, incorrect expiration dates, any mislabeling, and really reducing the compliance risks there. So I'd say those are the key ones there on the automated side.
Okay, thanks. Switching gears here a little bit and maybe pulling out to a 30,000-foot view, looking at some of the trends, we continue to see a demand for premium and specialized pet foods or even personalized pet nutrition. Do trends like that have an impact on automating production? Have you seen over the years as these trends have started to proliferate, have you seen that change the kinds of equipment and automation that manufacturers need?
Yes, I think it's more the growth on that side of things where some of those specialty lines might start pretty small and then they're trying to expand and get larger, and like where they could have just hand dosed ingredients and it was no big deal to keep up with demand and whatnot. That's where it's really pushing that automated side of, okay, we got to batch and dose these micro ingredients or any of our ingredients automatically, keep those out of people's hands. Again, you see the payback and the return on investment there from especially of just those accuracies that you see there and keeping that traceability of knowing every single ingredient, what lot is going in, you can track that accordingly. So that push, definitely it's more of when people are really trying to scale up quickly, that helps
Makes sense.
pretty fast.
That makes sense. Does that also happen on the supplier side? So, for example, with the processing of ingredients, certain kinds of ingredients, we hear, for example, like the scaling up comment, you made me think of insect protein, for example. If it starts to take off anymore, there is an issue of can it be scaled up efficiently and cost effectively? Can automation help on that side too?
Same type of thing. We've dealt with some of those side that you're like maybe 5 or 10 years ago would have thought, I don't know if this is going anywhere, but I really feel like that is a growing market
Mhm.
that they're looking at even our coding type systems of Apex to use that through. So scaling that up, but also tying it in with their automation system.
That makes sense. Would you say a lot of ingredient suppliers, for example, do use automation?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So again, they're especially on the bagged ingredients, mixes and premixes, whatnot, you're seeing that in almost all facilities being automated, batching, dosing.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Do you, this may be, I might be putting you on the spot here, and I apologize if I am, but what would you say is a percentage of manufacturers using automation? And is it more in the larger facilities or companies, or is it across the board?
The percentages are higher in the larger companies, but still surprisingly, even on that side, especially like our niche is that the coding and the micro ingredient system. So I'm always shocked by the numbers of plants that are still hand dosing and not
Mm,
relying on automation. So we're seeing a lot more, especially during the COVID years where
right.
labor was even harder. That's
Mhm.
where it's really starts pushing that direction of going, oh, okay, they can't keep labor or whatnot. What do we need to do to offset that? So there was a big push in those years, and it's just continued on. Maybe not as drastic as it was in those first few years, but it's still pretty steady. But across board, yeah, you're probably under 75% that are automated.
That is probably going to continue to grow just
Yeah, it
because
has.
of the
Yeah.
labor issues isn't going away.
And then just trying to be competitive with others. There's a big difference there of you get that return on the investment and a piece of equipment that's automated and ready to roll.
You mentioned how difficult it is to calculate, to give a general ROI because there are so many variables for each manufacturer in each situation. Is there a way to calculate the true cost of automation beyond the initial equipment investment? Is there a cost of the training, the learning curve, other elements of implementing automated systems?
Yeah, on that side, you can look at, again, it comes down to your labor of what you're expecting, what you're using now, and what that area of the plant, what that would be reduced by. So that's usually the portion. Another is just looking at losses, your inventory losses of, hey, obviously there's each batch, you're going to have some variances there that you're accounting for, and the end of the month inventories of, oh, we overused X and it's cost us this. So you can look at those overusages and whatnot and figure those in, because you're really going to tighten that down to almost nothing. Just the quality type side of things, it's hard to put a number to, but you can look at that same thing of, okay, what are we seeing on maybe certain recalls or things like that, that you can maybe put a kind of an average dollar figure to and figure that in to calculate.
You can't necessarily put a cost on delivering safe products, but you know it's going to be very costly if you don't. For
Yes.
example, speaking of recalls, I'm assuming that automated systems can also, we've talked about the end of line in terms of the lot codes and barcodes and everything, but does automation extend actually into the warehouse too, I'm assuming?
Yeah, I don't get too much into that side of things, but I know there's a lot with that same thing of automated transfer of the finished goods and different things, instead of someone having to travel through on a forklift that's getting removed. I've seen some that are same type of a robot or whatever that's picking a pallet and taking it to another location strictly on RFID. So yeah, there is quite a bit to that on the warehouse side, and I've seen it, but I just haven't dealt with it myself.
So the Amazonification of other types of warehousing and order fulfillment.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've had a few more technical questions come back in. One is, what is the next generation of coding efforts, either in general or for your company? Do you have any new technologies coming out?
Currently, I would say no. The basic is just applied gravimetrically, whatnot. And then there's others that maybe more, not really on the pet food side, but you see it more on aquaculture, that they're adding really high inclusions of liquids. They're looking more at vacuum coating because they really need to pull in that liquid to get that amount added. Especially on that side, they'll make pretty much a product that would float, and they're sinking it with adding the oil. So they're adding so much oil to it that, okay, then they want that product to sink for certain fish. So they'll throw that in, and with the vacuum coated, they can sink it. But I wouldn't say much more new technologies at this point on that side.
Okay. Yeah, and looking at the technology of some of these systems itself, are there backup systems? Are there manual override capabilities? And then I guess a secondary follow-up question would be, how does it vary like from plant to plant or company to company, like how much empowerment, let's say, an operator has on when to stop an automated system, if that makes sense?
Yes, it's still an automated system, but it still has that control room or whatever, and people to be able to, oh, this doesn't look right, stop this or whatnot. It's not going to be total AI and taking over all of our jobs, but I do think there's still that need for specialty employees to manage it and think through it and go, oh, this isn't quite correct or whatnot, or putting in different inputs from that.
So the system isn't going to be stopping doing shutdowns itself.
Yeah, no, I mean, other than, it's just like we see now, if something shuts down farther down, there's automation to say, oh, we got to shut down the equipment before that, so you're not cramming it into somewhere you don't have room for, causing other issues downstream.
Yeah, it all has to be connected, right? We were talking earlier about where a company can start in terms of implementing automation. What about space considerations? So one question that came in ahead of time was, if you don't have any height available, if there's just limited space in your plant, what are some solutions for that?
On our end, being the equipment supplier and automation, it really depends on what solutions we're looking for. For example, like a micro ingredient system, we'll look at different layouts. We'll get those measurements of what do we have to work with. If height's an issue, You might have to change how you're conveying it or transferring that. Most vendors will work with you to make it fit, do what you want to do there. Maybe you, instead of doing a gain and weight system for micro, that you have a scale underneath those bins and you're increasing the height. If height's really an issue, okay, maybe you can give up some of that accuracy and move to more loss in weight. It's a little bit more expensive because you have load cells on every single bin, but that would get rid of a scale and go directly into the transfer system. So there's definitely ways around it. We do bulk bag unloaders. Some customers have 30 foot of height and they have all sorts of room. Others don't. So you actually have to take part of the frame down. And then, so you're keeping that height to a minimum of where the forklift would reach up to, and keeping it within their ceiling height, not having issues there. So most vendors across any kind of equipment line hopefully will have some solutions for you to work with what you
So it
have.
sounds like there's a fair amount of flexibility available and even built in.
Yeah, again, most vendors I would think do that, but again, that's our niche on the Apex side is, that we do custom machines and custom microingredient systems. So that's where we'll work with vendors or with customers to make it work with what they've got.
It makes
Hopefully
sense.
not to have to build a whole nother facility.
Yeah, really.
Like on the automation side of just equipment that's already there and controlling that plant control system, no, there's not a ton of space needed there. You just have to have the electrical enclosure and wiring to the systems. But moving past that and making, like I said, microingredient systems or different things like that, maybe more manual labor now.
We've gotten through all the questions, Caleb. Is there anything else you wanted to cover or any other comments you wanted to make about automation?
Not that I can think of, other than, like I said, if you're not automating now, you kind of have to get on the bus because it's coming to us. Things are moving at a much faster pace than they have in the past. If you don't keep up with the innovation there, you're going to fall back and not be able to keep up.
Not be competitive. That's probably is true in just about every field you can think of, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Life itself. Thanks very much, Caleb, for your insights and your information. And thanks again to APEC for their support. Please watch for future Ask the Pet Food Pro discussions coming this year. We also have 2 live events coming up, including a couple of sessions at Pet South America and Brazil in August. And we're doing our Pet Food Forum Asia in Bangkok in October. And then, of course, Pet Food Forum, the main conference next year again in Kansas City. We would really appreciate everyone's feedback on today's chat. You can scan the QR code on the screen, or we also will be emailing a survey link in addition to the link to the recording when it is available. And finally, another reminder that will be available in about a week, maybe a little bit longer. You can find it on petfoodforumevents.com under the About tab. Thank you to everyone again for joining us today. Thank you again, Caleb, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of your day and evening.